Hi, and welcome to FrazlCast. Climb aboard the Gnome Train.
Woo! Chugga, 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 woo!
Please make sure to keep your limbs and experimental instruments inside the train at all times. And now, on with the show.
A podcast by a Blizzard fan gnome about World of Warcraft and geeky stuff. I promise you, they do talk about the World of Warcraft. They just go off the rails sometimes.
So I'm Frazley, and I'm joined by Rho of Realm Maintenance, a beloved member of the community, as Berserker and Navix of Unshackled Furry call him, the keeper of the podcast scrolls, a frequent guest on great podcasts like Azeroth Roundtable and more, and host of Realm Maintenance, Hearthcasual, and Rolling Restart. Did I cover all of it?
There's also a Dungeons and Dragons podcast I do called +5 to hit, but you've hit all the big ones.
Okay, do you host that one or do you guest on that one?
I mean, I'm one of the players on that one, so I guess I'm not a host of it, but right now, actually, for the most recent episodes, I've been doing the production end of things on there, like the editing and stuff like that, so, and people hear me at the top and bottom of the show temporarily while one of our players is busy doing other stuff, so I'm kind of, sort of a host, really, but not really.
Okay. So co-host, producer.
Yeah, just one of the crew. I'm just as important as any of the people on that team.
Nice. So on this episode, I'm going to peel back the curtain a bit and get to know Rho better. And if you've seen and heard Rho on other shows, you may know some of the stuff, but some of the stuff may be new to me, or I might have forgotten it. Like it goes over my head a lot.
Some of the answers may have changed. You never know.
Absolutely. And we met in person about a year ago. That was a blast.
Yeah, you were bringing up before we hit the record button here that had been almost a year, and I'm like, how the heck has it been a year already? It's crazy.
I know. And like you gave me a lot of the things that went and like told me things that I've kept to heart, like keeping this focus on the community, focus on the guests that I bring on. Some of the show format changes have been because of you, and I'm glad that you gave me that advice because it's helped me not be about me, but about who I have on.
Well, and I think the results have definitely shown. I mean, that I've seen more and more people just kind of flock and listen and download your show and just appreciate what you're doing out there. You're doing good things. I think you have a great podcast. I've seen the improvement over the past several months. It's good stuff, I think. And you're probably going to be doing this for quite a while. It's so far, it shows no signs of stopping. You've had constantly epic episodes, I think.
Well, thank you. That means a lot. I mean, because you see so many podcasts. So thank you. Wow. You and this are making me cry.
Ah.
Oh, but before we get into talking about you, we have to do one thing. So Epicinsanity, what time is it?
It's time to go around the table.
Great idea. So what have you been up to recently? Yeah, Epicinsanity just always likes to stay on. Like he's actually here if you just can't see him.
All that time that I was talking about his beard pre-show, he was listening.
Awesome. Absolutely.
Hi, Epic. No. So, what have I been up to recently? Just a couple of days ago, the Tombs of Terror solo adventure for Hearthstone went live, and I had purchased the whole thing in advance because you get like a free legendary and stuff if you did so I did that. Most of the last couple of days has been just playing that adventure, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. It actually is more fun than the Dalaran Heist, in my opinion. They've taken some of the stuff they did from Dalaran Heist. It's the same kind of formula, but they've thrown in new twists, new cards, new treasures, new hero powers, combining classes for dual class shenanigans. It's a ton of fun, and not all the stuff's even unlocked yet because the other chapters are going to be unlocked over the next couple weeks, but I do not regret a single cent of what I paid to unlock that content. It's super awesome.
It's good to see Hearthstone still being popular. I think a podcast Stream Key was saying Hearthstone's still one of the top games for streaming.
Oh yeah, and I think one of the reasons for that is because, and some people complain about the random elements of Hearthstone, but honestly, that's where some of the magic is, and you get the potential for a lot of crazy, unique moments, some really good stories that happen in Hearthstone, and stuff like that is just the the kind of candy that people who are on Twitch will just eat up all day. I mean, it's one thing to watch those YouTube videos of those funny and lucky moments happen, like the replays and stuff like that. It's another to be there when you see it happen right in front of your eyes, and you can say, I was there when this crazy thing happened, whether it was just someone playing casual or it was someone in a tournament and some big crazy thing happened. So I love Hearthstone so much, and it's one of the perfect kind of games for Twitch as far as like just something to view in the background while you're doing something else. I watch more Twitch Hearthstone streams and more Hearthstone YouTube videos than pretty much video content for any other game. Kind of a big thing. But I mean, it hasn't been just Hearthstone. I have been playing my fair share of WoW. I do a bit of raiding a couple nights a week. I think our group is kind of getting to the point where we're almost done with raiding in this current tier. We've beaten the Jara once already. We're going to try to get her down one more time, we think, and then take a little bit of a break till the next raid, whenever that is. And I've been going to Mecha Gahan, which I hope that you can definitely relate with, and I'm hanging out with your fellow brethren there, as it were. And you know what, Frazley? I don't know if it's because I play a Horde character. I don't know if it's because I did something in a previous life, or if I made some sort of wrongdoing or something like that, but I've been on this journey to get this mount from completing Mecha Gahan content and getting all the item drops and doing all the things. And I've done all the things. I've gotten all the item drops that you can possibly get in Mecha Gahan. Except two days ago, and now it's just one.
Ooh.
It's just a blueprint for a blue spray bot, which, for those who are not in the know, can drop off the Crazed Trog rare that's in the north part of Mecha Gahan, or that's a very low chance for it to drop. The other way it can drop is off of these data anomaly mobs. The only problem with data anomalies is they only appear when a specific quest is up, which is only there randomly, maybe once, possibly twice a week if you're lucky. So RNG on top of RNG on top of RNG, it's a struggle. The struggle's pretty real, but I've come this far. I can't stop now. I can't stop when I'm so close. I feel, and I use this gif a lot on Twitter, I feel like I'm Charlie Brown going after that football, and Lucy is the entire zone of Mecha Gahan holding that football, which is a blue spray bot blueprint. And every time I kill that Crazed Trog, whoof, football pulled away, and I follow my butt.
So you're short on the achievement for gnomes.
Yeah. I'm short on the achievement for content in a gnome-infested island. I don't know how my feelings about gnomes have grown or shrank as a result of this. Maybe I'll just keep my frustration and hatred toward mecha gnomes. We'll see. I've yet to plot any possible tactics of revenge, because right now, until I get that last item drop, Mecha Gnomes and Mecha Gahan's the greatest place in the world. I love it. It's a vacation mecca of Azeroth. It's the most wonderful place, and I would spend every second, every minute there in Mecha Gahan. Wonderful people, absolutely wonderful.
Hey, Ross, your nose is looking a little
and it's kind of grown a little long here.
Yeah.
Oh wow. I'm embarrassed now. Sorry. And the only other thing I've been up to is, have you heard of a card game called Slay the Spire?
Yes. Tom of the Blue Recluse has been telling me about that, and it's on my wish list. I just don't do so well with card games.
Yeah, so Slay the Spire, it was something that I played several months ago, back when I was kind of in a little bit of a Hearthstone lull, and it's this kind of deck-building game that has some dungeon run-ish types elements to it, customizing your deck as you go through this run, having choices to make as you go along. A really fun game. They just put out a new character which has different cards to choose from, different abilities and all that. And I've been messing with that on the beta client. But that pretty much sums up all of my recent stuff, Frazley. Lots of Hearthstone, little bit of WoW, little bit of non-Blizzard stuff. And when I'm not slaving away in my offline job, I'm either podcasting or I'm playing one of those games. So that's pretty much what I've been up to. What about you, man?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned the cycle because I want that. I haven't not been in Mecha Gahan, but that cycle is in Borderlands 3. So Spaz was on, I think, 2 weeks ago, and he got me so hyped for Borderlands 3 that I impulse purchased it after the show. And last weekend we spent, I think, it had to be almost 24 hours just streaming it, having fun, playing Borderlands 3. And they have that cycle, and it has guns on it. I mean, it's so fun. And Borderlands 3, it's everything that is in 1 and 2. I mean, it's just more of it. It's MMO-like because you have to earn upgrades, and it's just a lot of fun. And if you stream it, people have a chance to earn from chests while you're watching.
Yeah, I noticed there's kind of that whole interactive type of thing going on with Borderlands 3. I think that's cool. I think that's a bit ingenious on their end. It's pretty clever.
And then after that, just over in WoW, Frazley's heart's now up to 60, so it's not quite where, Pete just today got to 69. I know that a few other people are getting 65.
I'm almost at 65.
And I'm going to bet Spencer is over at 70. I've been seeing...
Oh, Spencer Downey from the starting zone? He has to be at 70, man. Are you kidding? He was probably at 70 before anyone knew what 65 was.
Exactly. And then gnoming it up over in Classics, having fun there. Denso, I finished up Lochmadon, so working on Lakeshire now. Did my first Classic dungeon run of Dead Mines. Got to see Mr. Smite again. I haven't seen Mr. Smite in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Our group had to do different things. The tank had to let the tank get rage. I had to do Sheep as a mage. So it was, everyone was doing their job, and it was fun. We were all talking. That is one thing I've seen in Classic. People are talking.
Yeah. And it's funny, again, and I've said this repeatedly in a number of places, not a Classic hater. I am all for people having fun on Classic, because if people are having fun playing World of Warcraft, period, that's good for everyone who likes Warcraft. I will comment, however, and say that a lot of people say that, the communication and the sense of community has been kind of lost in current World of Warcraft. And to that, I'd say you kind of get what you put into it. I feel that if you put in the effort and if you reach out and make those connections, then you can form great relationships and great friendships. You can create an excellent community. I think the reason why people feel like it's lost is because we kind of tend to go to the lowest common denominator when it comes to accessing content and stuff. We go the easiest route possible. And because there's a lot of things that create that ease of access in the current WoW, you're not the kind of person necessarily go reach out and directly invite people and stuff like that. But honestly, you can have that awesome community in current World of Warcraft. If you ever feel like, oh, well, Classic has it, but current WoW doesn't, yeah, that's partially true, but with a little bit of effort and with people of like minds and stuff like that, you can create some awesome groups. I mean, I saw Taliesin and Evitel tweet about how they were on a guild holiday. They were spending time with fellow guildmates, offline, all together in one place, and that's awesome. And then all of them have been playing, your regular World of Warcraft for so long. I find it super awesome that Classic is bringing people together, and you're seeing these friendships form, and it's reminiscent of those older times, some of which I experienced when I played Burning Crusade. But I invite people to try to transfer some of that, just some of that energy into current World of Warcraft, and you can make that magic happen there too.
Yeah, one thing I realize I don't do, and I'm guilty of it, when I'm in parties in current, I don't speak up in party chat. I think if I took the effort to speak up, maybe things would happen. Like when I was in Final Fantasy XIV, for the commendations, I would actually speak up. I would make jokes. I would try to make people give me a commendation, and it created communication.
Just like forming relationships offline, it's not always going to be perfect. Sometimes you're going to try to reach out and, and form a bond, and someone will be like, I'm just here to play the game. I'm not here to talk. I've run into dungeon groups where I'll like chit chat and stuff like that. It's like, keep going, or you're going to run into people who aren't the most social in the world, and that's perfectly fine. They're not doing anything wrong. You're not doing anything wrong. It's hit or miss. It's trial and error. You keep on trying, and eventually you'll find those people that you connect with, those people that you create that magic with.
And Classic's not perfect. Like, sure. I was doing the mage quest. These stupid mages. You go into the blue recluse. You're getting your rifts. I put on a rift. No mage's by. As soon as the thing happens, all these mages descend on my thing. I'm like, it's mine. That was so frustrating. So yeah, I mean, we can't just look at through these rose-colored glasses, because yeah, there are jerks over it. Over it.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with my glasses. I don't have my colored ones on, but I just want to say my glasses are fine.
I like your glasses, and
thank you. I like them too.
You have some really good vision, especially because you have a vision of the community. You are on Realm Maintenance, so your vision is able to see the RNG in everything. So every episode of Realm Maintenance has a bit of RNG, and RNG this episode means Rho, new guest.
I like it.
Second choice was really nuclear gnomes,
which is pretty close to a common one that I get whenever I put out a request for, hey, come up with what RNG stands for. Gnomes are brought up a lot. Nuclear brought up a lot. I think it has something to do with just memories of Nomar Gone and radiation and gnomes and stuff like that there. I think that's why nuclear gnomes just come up all the time.
Yeah, we just radiate in people's memories.
For Nomar Gone.
Yeah. All those memories. I bet you've got memories. Maybe not about Nomar Gone.
Oh, I have a memory of Nomar Gone. I'll give you a memory of Nomar Gone. Okay. I can give you some other memories too. Some people have asked me before, like, what's one of my biggest memories of first playing World of Warcraft? And it actually takes place in Nomar Gone. So I was just high enough to do Nomar Gone content. Maybe I was a little underleveled, but I had this friend of mine who was level 60 already, and he was a Night Elf warrior. His name was Jet Seraph. He was in the same group as me in Final Fantasy XI, which is the game that I had crossed over into WoW from. He's level 60. He's taking me along through Nomar Gone, trying to help power level me and all that stuff. And I've got this little imp out as a pet. Back then, I think they've kind of fixed this in current World of Warcraft, but back then, you see, if you jumped down from a platform, or if you went from one spot to another that wasn't your kind of typical line of sight thing, your minion, your companion, wouldn't jump with you. They'd use the terrain of the dungeon and get to you in the most logical way possible.
Yeah.
We were using shortcuts in Nomar Gone to get from one place to another place faster. I didn't dismiss my pet. I didn't know that I was supposed to. So I jumped down. My Imp or Voidwalker is going off and going through pretty much 2/3 of Nomar Gone. As it's moving along, it is aggroing, at least half of the instance. And we're getting pretty close to the end. I like turn around, kind of like a game camera turn around. I see this mass of mobs heading our way. And I just say in Ventrilo, something's coming. And my friend's like, what do you mean something's coming? Then he actually looks back and he's like, what the? Next thing you know, there's this army of Nomar Gone mobs, which, mind you, he's level 60 and they're far from it. But it was such a large army, Frazley, that he died to them.
Wow.
Was one of my most embarrassing and yet epic moments in my early days of playing World of Warcraft back in the Burning Crusade.
You just brought a bunch of friends with you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's my long history with the gnomes has its origins there, and they're mechanical minions and leper gnomes and all that stuff. We have a long history with one another.
Would you say that's one of your favorite gaming memories?
It's one of my favorite gaming memories in World of Warcraft for sure. I mean, I think of like what other big gaming memories are out there. I would say beating Final Fantasy, what's now called Final Fantasy VI, but when I played it, the US version was called Final Fantasy III. I think beating that was one of the first RPG games that I had played from start to finish. That was a pretty cool gaming memory. Beating RPGs, those single-player RPGs, just reaching the conclusions of those were kind of some real epic memories. More recent one is like God of War, this action RPG for PlayStation 4. That one was super epic. But my favorite gaming memory of all, if I were to take all of them and say what's number one, it has to be that very first BlizzCon that I attended. There's nothing quite like your first BlizzCon. The atmosphere, the energy, just making connections with people, many of which you have never actually met offline before, and, can physically shake hands, hug, do whatever. That was something really special. It was... There's nothing quite like the first one that you go to, and all the other BlizzCons I've gone to have been great, mind you. But being there for the reveal of Warlords of Draenor, and people may be like, "Oh wow, what a way to do your first BlizzCon! You got Warlords of Draenor revealed." But you gotta remember, back then we didn't know what was going to happen with Warlords of Draenor, and when we saw what Warlords of Draenor was at the beginning, we were like, wow, this is different. This is pretty freaking amazing. And then they showed the updated character models for like dwarves and orcs and stuff like that. And people are losing their minds. And it was just a really special thing. And also BlizzCon has a lot of my favorite gaming memories, just period. So I know I wasn't actually playing a game for those memories, but honestly, if it wasn't for gaming, then those BlizzCons wouldn't have happened and those memories wouldn't have been made. So
one thing I've enjoyed tonight is you talk about like these out of game memories and the out of game community. And I've seen that myself, just like the different people I know, like Ali and Leo Wild in chat, Kappa. I mean, these people that I may not game with them, but we have this bond through a game.
Yeah, it's really special. I remember in the earlier days of playing video games and stuff like that, I remember back when, and there's still kind of a stigma to it to a degree with like older people, with like a generation above me right now. But I remember when gaming was seen as this really, entirely introverted, reclusive, antisocial kind of activity. And just even the way technology's changed, the way it's become more mainstream and influences media beyond just gaming, but outside of gaming itself, just the way it's become a part of everyday life for so many people, especially, and I mean, some people may joke about this, but mobile gaming has had an impact on making gaming overall more acceptable.
Yeah,
you've got to credit mobile gaming for that, even if you're not a big fan of mobile gaming. Gaming is an important part of my life. You can take anything and turn it into a social experience. It just takes a little bit of effort to find people with like minds and like interests. And one of the great things about BlizzCon is that's a place where pretty much everyone's family, because everyone's enjoying all these epic games. Everyone's a gamer there. And I think that's one thing that, and that applies in really most conventions too. But BlizzCon helped crack a shell that I had for some time, which is funny to say because I'd been podcasting, for several months before BlizzCon. But I would really say that it wasn't until that first BlizzCon that I felt ready to actually make some very important and special connections with people who I consider very good friends, some people who I love like brothers and sisters and will cherish for the rest of my days.
I think it was Dravi. I don't remember who it was, but something about how one of the reasons they love BlizzCon is because somebody there has played a game that they played, whereas like Gen Con and stuff like that, there's so many varied games out there that you might run into somebody that's done it, but BlizzCon, it's different.
Right, because it's a bit more of a narrow field. It's a specific group of games, right?
Yeah.
I think that's one reason why BlizzCon remains so special, because it's big, but it's not too big. It's epic, but it's not overwhelmingly epic.
Yeah. It's like those EverQuest fan fests. I know people who have met and they found the person that they spent the rest of their life with at these fan fests because they all had that bond around games.
Yeah, it's really special. But memories like that can be made at not just BlizzCon, but any kind of convention, guild meetups, stuff like that. You can make moments like that happen. It just takes a little bit, just takes the effort, the energy, the desire, and you can make it happen. And it's one of those things I think is easier said than done. But once you get that first taste, once you experience that magic of connecting with people whom you've only known as, text on a computer screen, once you make that some of those first offline connections, you find yourself wanting to make more of them and more of them. So it's just a matter of getting through that first one, and then your world opens up from there.
And I'd say a easy substitute is probably the wrong word, but an easy intermediary to start some of those is podcasting.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, talking voice to voice is definitely a step up from just typing text to text on the screen, because, you put words on a screen and sure, you can read the message and stuff like that, but can you hear the emotion in it? Can you understand the tone of it? No. When you take your communication to, a voice-to-voice kind of thing, then in a lot of cases, unless, you do your first 10 episodes in a very monotonic way, the way I did with Realm Maintenance, but you find your voice over time, and you find yourself emoting more and putting just more of yourself and more of your soul into there. And I think that's one reason why I've always enjoyed listening to podcasts, because let's be honest, there are a lot of World of Warcraft podcasts out there. There are a lot of podcasts out there, period. And a lot of podcasts do a lot of the same similar kind of things. A lot of World of Warcraft podcasts talk about Warcraft news and events and stuff like that. A few break from that formula and do something different, have a different spin, have a different take. But a lot of them are very similar in terms of their format and their structure and their content. But what makes me listen to so many of them is the person saying those words, the emotion behind those words, the additional opinion that follows that factual information. It's that kind of stuff that it pulls me into podcasting. In a way, it's kind of a first step to, as a listener to podcasts, it allows you, it's kind of a safe space way to connect with these people. They may not necessarily know that you are connecting with them. Well, they know because they know you as a listener, but they don't know personally. But by downloading a podcast and listening to it, you are opening yourself up to learn more about who this person is who's speaking into the microphone, what makes him or her tick, what makes him or her happy or excited to talk about this stuff that they enjoy talking about.
That was a big realization for me. Like, I used to think that I was just there delivering the news or an opinion, and then Chris of MMA Reporter said, no, they can hear the news anywhere else. It's you that they're going for.
Yeah.
Your uniqueness.
What makes Frazley? Yeah.
Yeah.
Gnome voices and auto-tuning and stuff like that.
Being crazy, being nuts.
It's true.
So how did you get into podcasting?
The story goes back to, I guess I should say that I first started listening to podcasts right at the start of Wrath of the Lich King. First podcast I listened to was The Instance, and it was simply, I discovered what a podcast was because in Google I typed something to the effect of Wrath of the Lich King Instance Guide. I wanted to get information on the new instances, the new dungeons in Wrath of the Lich King, because I was super excited about them. And having Instance in there, the Instance podcast popped up on the list relatively near the top, and I'm like, what's this? I checked it out, listened to it, that was my first taste with what a podcast was. I started searching for World of Warcraft podcasts, and that led me to places like All Things Azeroth, Rarcast, Stopcast, Control Out WoW, WoW Files, Hearthcast, Horde for Life, a lot of shows that aren't around anymore, which is crazy to think about. I found myself listening to more and more and more of them, and I was working in a convenience store, but I was working at one that wasn't exceptionally busy. And as a result, and the owner was pretty cool and relaxed and open about like listening to stuff while I was at work. So I would be at work and in between helping customers while I'm stocking or doing stuff, I'm listening to podcasts. So I was listening to a ton of podcasting content about World of Warcraft. I'd hear all these segments that were happening with the instance and convert to raid and stuff. And I was like, you know what? I don't think I could ever do a podcast, but I think I could do a podcast segment. So I toyed that with the idea of making a segment for a podcast, but I didn't think that I was good enough because I didn't even know what I was doing. I was going into this completely fresh, unexperienced, hadn't read up on anything, didn't have a cool mic or anything like that. So I figured, okay, if I'm going to start, I need to get a better mic, and I should try to start by making a segment for a smaller show out there that might be interested in it. So I got a Blue Snowball microphone. I actually still use a Blue Snowball microphone to this day. I actually have a more expensive podcasting microphone, and I find that I still use my Blue Snowball. It's weird. Regardless, Something Suggestive was a WoW podcast back in the day hosted by Jan. She had a very personal kind of life in WoW type of podcast where she'd also throw in some segments with some helpful information. She'd take emails and read them and stuff like that. It was a small but very personal, and I felt like it was something, not just something suggestive, but I thought was something special. So I'm like, you know what? This is a smaller show, but I feel like this is the kind of show where I would feel comfortable making a segment and submitting a segment. So the first stuff that I did was a series of podcast segments called Achievatron, and that was a segment on how to unlock certain achievements in World of Warcraft. Achievatron was actually the name of an achievement, too, from the Blackwing Descent raid. So the Achievatron segment started it out, and Jan was interested in me doing a segment and stuff like that. When I said, hey, would you use this? And she said, sure. She would get those segments, put them on her show. She loved the content. She thought what I was doing was great. And eventually got to the point where she was saying, hey, you know what? You're good enough to do a podcast. Why don't you do your own podcast? I think a lot of content creators deal with imposter syndrome a lot. And back then, I especially was, because I was like, it's just a segment thing. I couldn't do a whole podcast. There's no way. And she's like, no, you should really give it a shot. You should try it. You have it in you. I wanted to do something that, at least from my point of view, from my experience, I thought no one had done before. And considering there were so many podcasts in World of Warcraft, I was like, okay, what if I did a podcast about all of those podcasts, since I love listening to all those podcasts? I remembered the TV Guide channel for cable TV is kind of like this channel that's dedicated to talking about all of the other channels.
Yeah.
Why don't I make a podcast that in that same vein is about all the other podcasts? And originally, I didn't plan to do an interview in it. It was just kind of a news informational type of thing, where I also have a segment where I throw in my opinion about something Warcraft related. That was the Rolling Restart segment, which eventually became its own show. Yeah, that's where the ball gets rolling there. If it wasn't for Jan on the Something Suggestive podcast inspiring me, if it wasn't for Google leading me to the instance, I wouldn't be talking to you right now.
That's incredible, because if it wasn't for you, I don't think I would do podcasts, because I listened to like I thought there were only like 3 podcasts. Then when I heard a bumper on, I think it was All Things Azeroth, that said, hey, check out Realm Maintenance. I was like, whoa, there's like a million podcasts. And that encouraged me to add my voice.
And I think one of the greatest things about having done what I've been doing, and it doesn't happen super frequently. And I almost kind of like that it doesn't happen every day or every month. But those few stories that I have received over the years, when I hear from someone, it's like, hey, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have found out about this podcast. Or even the bigger ones, it's like, hey, you know what? Your show inspired me to do my own thing and create my own podcast. Those stories there, I've gone into this thing from the beginning. My motivations, my intention was never to try to be big and make money off of it. For me, this has been very much a hobbyist kind of thing. I do have a Patreon, but I don't channel a whole lot of energy into the Patreon. It's essentially just a tip jar. If people want to use it, awesome. It helps pay stuff. But my whole intent with Realm Maintenance was to give more exposure to smaller shows, recognize the big shows too, and just give podcasts another platform, another means to spread and grow their listener bases. Essentially being a pseudo community manager for WoW podcasting, and over time that would extend to other Blizzard games.
It was the list that led me to finding Half a Report. I mean, because I just went through the list, I was like, oh, Half a Report.
Yeah, it's amazing how as many podcasts that I can think of that have done things in a very similar way. Every once in a while, you get a podcast that really surprises you and does something in a very different way, and it's super exciting to discover those. And I think the podcasts I like talking about the most are the ones that do something really different. And to me, it doesn't matter as much whether they are the most professional sounding in the world, but when they do something that I don't think that I've heard very often or ever heard at all, those are the ones that interest me the most. Those are the ones I like to talk about the most.
So what would you say is a hidden pitfall in podcasting that prevents people from succeeding?
So this question... we need to talk about this question in a moment here. Yearly maintenance is a end of the year thing where I record bonus interview content with everyone I've talked to in the previous year. This year, one of the things I wanted to do was come up with a kind of connectivity between guests where one guest asks a question that the next guest will answer, and then that guest, their last question is to come up with a question for the next guest, so on and so forth. I had to start somewhere, though, so I asked you, Frazley, to come up with a question to kind of start off that chain. And then you came up with this question that I thought was super awesome, and I'm like, you know what, this question's so good, I'm just going to ask everyone that question for every segment. So this question that I just asked me is a question you're going to hear on Yearly Maintenance a lot when it comes out in December.
Excellent. Hey, no one expects a Gnomes imposition.
Yeah, and true. To answer the question, though, you see, there are a lot of pitfalls, and I don't know how many of them I would necessarily say are hidden. I think the one you don't think about is how much effort needs to happen in order to improve your listener base in the early stages. So I have been on record saying that I don't care if 3 people listen to my show, or 300, or 3,000, and so on and so forth. And I'd say that pretty much stays true for the most part. That being said, if you create a podcast and only 8 people listen to it, then what that does, if you only have a small number of people listen to it, is it makes you wonder. It might create feelings of self-doubt in you, make you wonder, hey, am I good enough? Is my show not worth listening to? And the thing is, usually, the reason why so many shows get such small download numbers in the beginning, it's not because they're not good enough. It's not because their show sucks. It very rarely, in my opinion, has anything to do with that. You need to do a little bit of networking. You need to do a little bit of self-promotion. And I'm not saying do the promotion stuff so that you become big name and famous and stuff like that so you can start raking in money and turn it into a job. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is when you first have your show out there, when you have your first several episodes out, it's important to make connections with other people. It's important to promote the show. It's important to get the name of it out there so that the name of it spreads, the word about it spreads, and you bring in those first few dozen people listening to the show, and they maybe bring in a few people as well, and it's kind of a thing that grows a bit. And it doesn't have to grow to thousands upon thousands. It doesn't have to hit 4 digits or 5 digits, but with just a little bit of work, you can turn those 8 listeners into 800 listeners. And if you think about it, and you realize that the stuff that you are creating is being listened to on a weekly or every other weekly basis by 800 people, how many people in the world can say that hundreds of people go out of their way to directly check out your content on a weekly basis? As much as we work and as much as we do things and create things, I think there's something special about the fact that people make the choice to interact with your stuff. And it doesn't have to be tens of thousands or millions of people checking out your thing. It can be. I'm not saying you don't have to be ambitious. I'm not saying that making money from podcasting is a bad thing. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that if you don't feel you can, if you feel you can do that. If you have that confidence, if you have that ambition and motivation that you want to be that kind of podcaster, then by all means go for it. But I think just in general, if you are making a podcast and you want to grow it and you want to feel like what you are doing is making an impact on some lives out there, it's just like watering a plant. You need to give it a little love. You need to give it a little attention, and you need to help it grow a little bit. It's all about, help me help you, right? It's all about just putting in a little, it's kind of a common thing that I've talked about from the top of the show today, but you get in what you put out of it. If you want your podcast to be listened by more people, it's not going to happen if you don't take some actions to help make that happen. So yeah, that'd be the hidden pitfall. Just growing your audience in those early stages. I think a lot of shows that don't succeed are the shows that don't put in that little bit of extra energy at the start of their podcast creating to do that.
I would say year 2 is when I finally felt like the numbers were like, okay, like year 1 to 2 was like, is anybody out there? And and just over time, building connections with people, trying to be out there. And one thing that I tried to do is I tried to support other people doing what I'm doing, because if I can get one person to find another show, like Leo Wild just said that they found the Half Hour Report, they think through me. I'm like, that is a cool thing that you passed the Half Hour Report on to me. I passed it on to somebody else. And that networking, it's amazing.
Yeah. And along with that networking, it could mean reaching out and saying, hey, I'm the creator of X and X podcasts. If you're a podcast that's looking for, guest hosts on your show and stuff like that, check my stuff out. Tell me what you think. And if you want to have me on sometime, I'd be happy to be on and talk about stuff. One of the reasons why I feel like Realm Maintenance had as much success in its first few years as it did is because just the nature of my show, because I decided to incorporate interviews into it. That meant the only way I was going to do it is by actually networking. So I had to reach out to other shows to get those interviews set up to do the thing. And in the process, that also led to me getting opportunities to appear on other shows. I'd also credit a lot of the early growth of Realm Maintenance to Medros and All Things Azeroth. If it were not for that show, and if it were not for Medros, I would not have been given the invitation to be a co-host on All Things Azeroth for, I want to say it was like roughly a year and a half. I went and had an awesome opportunity to interview Ghostcrawler, who was one of the lead designers on World of Warcraft. I don't bring it up often enough. All Things Azeroth had a huge impact in me becoming more recognizable, in my show becoming recognizable and downloaded enough. So yeah, a lot of props to him. All Things Azeroth is one of the longest running podcasts for World of Warcraft out there. Everyone has specific tastes as far as what podcasts they like or not, but whether it is your cup of tea or not, All Things Azeroth has had such an amazing impact on not just myself, but a number of other podcasters out there. And Medros, the big guy, he doesn't get enough credit, I think. As much junk and crap as I give him, as much as I tease him, I don't think he knows sometimes just how much I appreciate what he did for me.
Yeah, he gave me a shot on the All Warriors cast and gave me the taste of, I think he was my first podcast that I guested on, and that gave me the taste, and like I wanted more of it. And I think from that, then like Lita got me on behind the avatar. I mean, it's that networking. It's reaching out to people. Through all this, I'm betting you've gotten a lot of advice from people. What is the best piece of advice anyone's ever given you?
It's cheesy, and this is an answer I've given before, but it's true. It's advice that came from Scott Johnson from The Instance, and it's probably advice that you've heard from other people before, whether they heard it from him or he heard it from someone. But when it comes to making a podcast, make the podcasts that you think you'd want to listen to. One thing that I do actually is, and it's not out of narcissism or vanity, it's not out of me trying to be particular of, did I mess anything up? Did I hear an extra whisper of breath there? But when I'm done recording and putting together a podcast and putting it out there, I play it back and I listen to it just to see like, hey, am I having fun listening to this? And I would say 90% of the time, yeah, I am. And I'm human. Every once in a while, I'll put out an episode out there, and others may like it and finding it entertaining. But sometimes I make an episode, and I put it out there, and then I listen to it, and I'm like, that wasn't one of my better episodes, but it's okay. Not everyone's perfect. But yeah. I listen to my own stuff and just to kind of validate, am I making the kind of podcast I'd want to listen to? That's been a key bit of advice, is just make the show you want to listen to. Because if you are engaged in the idea of what you're putting out there, what does that potentially say about the people that are downloading that show? If you don't want to create this podcast, if you don't want to listen to what you're creating, are other people going to want to listen to what you're creating? There's probably some people out there who will, but possibly not as many as there would if you were interested. If you like what you're putting out there, then odds are that's going to show in your energy and your audio body language as it is. I mean, you can just kind of tell by inflections. You can hear the emotion in someone's voice when they're talking about it on the podcast. It's one of those things that's like when I first started doing Realm Maintenance in those first like 10 or 20 episodes, I listened back to those and it was in such a monotone. Eventually, I grew out of that. And I think it was just when I started realizing that you don't have to be so mechanical about podcasting. You just express yourself, you just go at it, put it all out there. But at the end of the day, man, make the podcast that you want to listen to your own stuff. And if you're enjoying what you're listening to, then you're doing something right.
I like that you mentioned that there's multiple types of podcasts for people out there, and that there's a show that you may like and that you may not like. And Realm Maintenance is an amazing place to find what you're looking for and to find like, okay, this one I like, this one I don't like. And one thing people may not realize is all the work that you do each week to create a list of all the podcasts covering Blizzard games and choosing when to put episode titles and when not to put episode titles. And so how did you get started making the list? Was the podcast before the list or the list before the podcast?
The podcast was before the list, I want to say. The list happened at the time that I think it was, but yeah, it had to be before Blizzard Watch. Back when it was WoW Insider, at some point, originally it was WoW Insider that did the weekly podcast roundup. And the weekly podcast roundup, it was every Monday or Tuesday. They would have an article where they put links to all of the podcasts out there that are covering content and stuff. And their list was fairly extensive and encompassing, but they would miss some shows sometimes. There were some podcasts out there that they didn't know about that they'd miss as far as that goes. Eventually, they stopped doing the weekly podcast roundup. And when I found out that they were stopping the weekly podcast roundup, I'd actually reached out to them and said, not that there's really any issue of copyright infringement or anything like that, but I'm thinking about continuing the tradition you guys started and doing this kind of post, this kind of format article on the Realm Maintenance site. And do you have any problem with that? And they said, no, go ahead. I took the torch from WoW Insider, which eventually became Blizzard Watch, and that's how the weekly podcast roundup started. And it was, for the longest time, it was just a post that I put up every Sunday or Monday. It's kind of bounced back from one day or the other over the years. Right now, it's on Mondays. In the process of doing Realm Maintenance as a podcast, and me trying to find ways to change up the show and make it a little bit different, I'm like, one thing that I was noticing on the podcast is in podcast news, because I didn't want to talk about every single podcast every week, I was only covering a handful of shows every week. And it's like, well, I mean, that's cool, but it'd be nice if other people knew that those aren't the only podcasts out there to listen to. Other podcasts are worth checking out. And then I realized, well, I'm already putting the work into this roundup article. Why don't I just read off the roundup on the show and make it entertaining? And hence, the weekly podcast roundup became a segment. I decided there's so many freaking podcasts to talk about that I'm just going to go Micro Machines Man on it and say them outrageously fast, but still in a way that they can be comprehended and heard. It's like, when I do this, I realize I'm saying it really fast, but I say it really fast with the intent of, I say it fast, but not too fast, so people can still understand the words I'm saying. And if people are on a podcast player, they can always slow it to half speed and hear what the heck I'm saying.
Now, it's funny you mention that, because I've one time had my player at 2x, and it's like...
Oh, don't even try, man. If you listen to the roundup at 2 speed, Titans help you.
What goes into your weekly process to create this list?
It helps that I have maintained a list of links to what the podcasts are in the first place, and I start by going to my own directory listing of what all the podcasts are out there that are actively producing a podcast. And to me, that is how they put out an episode, typically within the last 6 weeks. If they haven't put out an episode within 6 weeks, I will usually bump them to an inactive category, and then after about 3 months, I will take them off the list, because if they aren't putting a show out, then yeah. But I will start with that list, and I just go link by link. I mean, I listen to a lot of podcasts, but I don't listen to all of them, so I just go from top to bottom, link by link, see, okay, is there a new episode from this show from this period of time? If there is, awesome. Put in the episode title, click on the next one, so on and so forth ad nauseum. The process used to be a lot longer than it is now, but it's kind of muscle memory, and I found a rhythm that works, and it usually takes me about an hour to an hour and a half. I try not to go too fast, because in addition to finding out, hey, did they put out an episode at all, I'm also reading the show description, especially if it's for a podcast that I didn't listen to, which when you have like 80, 90 Blizzard podcasts out there, and I'm only listening to like 10 to 15 a week, there's a lot of them I don't listen to. So I'll take a quick look at the show description, and if anything jumps out at me, it's like, oh, hey, this one had so-and-so as a guest. I'll take a minute to stop from typing in stuff in the roundup, and I'll go to my show notes for the next Realm Maintenance and say, this show had this guest on, reminder, bring up this show in podcast news, so on and so forth. So depending on how much of that stuff there is, that could slow down the process. But yeah, nowadays it takes about an hour to an hour and a half to do. It used to be a much longer process, and which is weird, because back in the day there weren't anywhere near as many shows, but it just felt like it took forever. But now I'm just kind of in the habit of it.
Do you listen to anything while you're doing it?
Sometimes if I come across a show that had that, like I said, it has something interesting there, or it's like there's something that I might want to mention on podcast news. If I notice a show that's something like that, I'll hit play on it and start listening to it as I'm continuing to do work, just kind of getting a listen for, let's see what this is all about. And if I continue in here and it's like, yeah, this is something definitely worth mentioning, I'll do so.
So in any of these endeavors,
Mhm.
if you could do this all over again, what is the first thing that you would do?
I don't know if there's anything that I would necessarily do differently. I think the only thing I can think of that I might do differently is be a little more outgoing and outreaching in that first year than I was before. The first year was a really awkward year because I, again, being very introverted, not being the most social person in the world, it's such a crazy thing to think that being the kind of person that I was, and here I was creating a podcast that by its nature required me to reach out and contact these other podcasters and these other shows and stuff like that. It kind of forced me out of that shell. But now having the knowledge that I had and having the experience I had of what those first couple years were like, if I was able to do it all over again, I would be going into it with more confidence. So I'd be more outgoing. I'd be able to reach out better. I wouldn't worry about rejection anywhere near as much. I wouldn't worry about not hearing back from people anywhere near as much. I wouldn't let the small stuff get to me. So I think it's just a matter of I do everything I did, but I do it with more confidence because I've seen over the years the results of what I put into it and what I got out to it. And I just kind of take the overall lessons that I learned and apply them as best as I can. Do I think it would have turned Realm Maintenance into a much bigger thing or a much crazier thing? No, I think it would pretty much play out just about the same as it did, but a little better, a little bigger. And I've never been the kind of person to be huge internet famous. I'm known by hundreds of people. I'm known by, I guess, technically several thousand people a week that listen to the show. That's far from being famous. It's far from being internet famous. I'm a podcaster. People listen to me. There are podcasters all over the world nowadays that have dozens, hundreds, thousands, even more people listening to them. I'm one of a very large group of people with a common interest in that we like to talk on the internet. And we like to express ourselves, and we like to have fun and create things for people on the internet. And it's an awesome feeling being part of that. The main thing I do different is take the confidence I have now and the lessons I learned and apply them to the beginning process as best as I could and see what happens from it.
I echo that because I'm the same way. I never would expect to be hosting, guesting, I never would have expected to have been I always thought I was going to be behind the scenes, never a personality doing this stuff. I've got the stutter. I've got all the things that would make it a horrible presenter. And if I had just been more confident, I like talking with people like you because I like hearing that. I like hearing, you mentioned the Imposter Syndrome earlier. How did you overcome that voice in your head? That voice that I think a lot of people have that they may not realize, or if they do, they don't know how to get past it.
I've never entirely beaten it. It's still there sometimes. I recognize it for what it is. I recognize that it's a voice, but it's one voice in a sea of voices. It's a smaller voice than the other voices out there. It's just one of those things where repetition and doing it enough, it was just kind of, I've always been, amongst other things, I've been a kind of a stubborn person. So as much as I would hear that voice nagging me in the back of the head saying, hey, you're not that much, you're not a big thing, the stubborn side of me would be like, well, you know what? I don't care if I'm not that big a thing. I'm still going to podcast anyway, so shut the F up.
Just tell that voice to stick it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah. It's like, I don't think it's inaccurate to say that there are a significant number of content creators out there, not just podcasting, but other forms of content that have their own personal demons that they fight with, that maybe deal with family issues, that maybe deal with things like depression or any number of things. That we all have our battles to fight, and I have my own battles to fight. I'm just like anyone else. I'm just as human as anyone else in that part. I think one of the things that I like about podcasting is I kind of feel like I have the opportunity when I'm talking to be the best version of myself that I can try to present myself as. I would never say that I'm wearing a mask when I'm podcasting, but more so I'm just trying to be the best me that I can be. And I find it easier to do that in podcasting than in my offline life. It's just kind of how I'm wired.
The good part of you times 10.
It's how I roll.
Well, I think with that, it's time for us to roll on out of here. So thank you for joining me on FrazlCast. I was so nervous for tonight. I was like, I just...
Aw, dude, you had nothing to be worried about. Now, if you get someone like, Chris Metzinon or Mike Morheim, then okay, I understand the nervousness. But it's just me, man. You and I, we've talked, we've met. You're a cool guy. And again, it's like you've done such amazing work with this show, and you got people that love what you're doing, and you have people talking to you on a regular basis here. I'm really proud of what you've been able to do with FrazlCast, man. You're doing awesome work. I will say that as much as I enjoy podcasting and I talk to other podcasters and stuff like that, you've found the passion there, and you are, in terms of like the technical aspects of it and stuff like that, and just trying to do everything you can to make it the best kind of thing possible. In terms of that aspect of the thing, I'd say you're a far more professional podcaster than I am. And I say that from a means of attitude, of how you approach it from an attitude and stuff like that. I still consider myself a very casual kind of kickback kind of person when it comes to podcasting. But everyone approaches it differently. And I've seen that growth in what you're doing here. So, man, kudos to you. Great work for what you've been doing here. I can't wait to see what else you put out, man. And thank you for having me on.
Wow. And because with you, with all the work that you do for like the yearly maintenance and wow, it's funny. I see all the awesome stuff that you do that I want to do.
The yearly, okay, so one reason why I do yearly maintenance, and I've mentioned this to a few people, I do yearly maintenance so I have nowhere near as much work to do the last 2 or 3 weeks of the year.
Smart. Okay.
Yearly maintenance is something that I do because, hey, it's special, it's exciting, and it allows me to have a normal Christmas and New Year's without worrying about making podcasts.
Oh, you're smart. So where can the audience find you?
You'll hear and read a lot about who I am by just going to Twitter. You can find me at Rowow, that's spelled RHOWOW. And you can also go to realm-maintenance.com, which is the site for Realm Maintenance, has a directory of podcast sites. The most recent episode of Realm Maintenance links to some of my other work as well. Those would be the two key places. We mentioned at the top of the show the other stuff I do. Hearthcasuals for Hearthstone fans. Rolling Restart is for WoW folks. And +5 to hit if you're into listening to Dungeons & Dragons podcasting. Check me out on that show. But that pretty much covers all the big basics there.
I just got word. I need to go to Mecha Gahan because I need to keep hiding the blueprint from Rho. Oh. You weren't supposed to hear that.
I see. So you're the one telling the data anomalies to stash away the blueprint. Okay.
No.
All right. Well, I'm just warning you. When patch 9.0 comes around and we go to Blood Elf Island or Forsaken Island, you remember this.
Ah, Philly!
Activating customized corporate transporter.
I'm over at Mecha Gahan. No, I'm not hiding blueprints from Rho. No, I'm just here because...
I'm a gnome. Let's look at what has been happening in the community.
Awesome, let's do that. So BlizzCon is coming soon, which means it's time for parties. So I want to remind you about 2 parties. I mentioned them many times here, but we are still a few weeks away. But if you can, make sure to plan to go to DitchCon and Con Before the Storm. DitchCon is on Wednesday, October 30th from 8:30 to 1 a.m. Pwnecast puts on this epic party, and I hear it's always a fun time. I'm a proud backer of the festivities, even if I'm not going this year. You will need to RSVP, but tickets are free, and they can be found at ditchcon.com. The description is, come dressed as your favorite foe, regardless of fandom, and impress our judges into crowning you the best villain, taking home awesome gaming swag. Added the echo. The villain costume contest will be judged by 2 special celebrity judges to be announced at a later date. You can enjoy drinking, mingling, and dancing to epic mixes all night by our exclusive music meister, DJ Grains. And as usual, there will be major swag giveaways, and don't forget our annual Michael Jackson dance-off. We will have 2 bartenders for the cast bar so you can drink and dance in one place. And then Combat for the Storm teamed up with Wowhead this year, so they said that they will have guest personalities, podcasters, streamers, pro teams, artists, and fan sites across all Blizzard games. Plus, they are going to have a fan art gallery, a photo booth, World of Podcast, and much more. It's free, no registration or ticket required, and it's open to all ages. It's on Thursday, October 31st from 5 p.m. to midnight. I'm also a proud backer of this event, so I have 2 pins up on the wall behind me in the studio. And finally for this week, Starry M of Icy Veins posted about a really cool art series by Vlad on the WoW subreddit, and they are chronicling their classic journey using some incredible works of art. Just incredible what creativity is in our community, so I've got a link in the show notes to this as well. Well, this has been another episode of FrazlCast. Thank you to Rho for coming on and the kind words you said to me. Those mean a lot, and to hearing this from somebody who's seen so many podcasts over the years. Well, many of them he's heard, not a lot of things that do video. I couldn't resist the pun. And shout out to Jody of Playhouse Square, who sent me a very cool email earlier this week saying they love the shows and have been having way too much fun in Classic the last few weeks. And a shout out to Jendon, who's been busy with work, but they stopped by a stream and said they enjoyed the latest episode. Words like these mean a lot. The hours I put into the show are worth it when I hear that you enjoy the episode. You are my community. Thank you to Sister Lord, Burkhart, and Dirty, is it Dirty or Dirty? But thank you to all of you who posted on the Morally Gray Discord about how much they enjoyed the episode with Ali and Gin. I keep getting tripped up on that name. Is it Gin or Gin? I know it's Gin. It's just in my head. It's Gin. But then I also get GIF and GIF. Anyway, before we get into a debate on that, Jody and Jendon both sent those messages to Twitch. And the Twitch has been popping. Is that still a word? We got enough subs for the Frazzle Wave! It's a wave/hello emote. Ali pointed out that I like to wave to people when they say hi in chat. And I do. I really like to go like, hi, how you doing? Thank you to Sir Onion Knight for making these great emotes. And the Frazzle facepalm is undergoing a revamp. It's disappeared for a bit and I'm waiting for Twitch to approve it. It'll probably be back by the time this episode goes live. Maybe. But thank you to everybody who helped me get here. Thank you to all my Twitch subs out there. Thank you to Ali, Alessander, Amanda, Capo, Cogspring, Crunk, Dorkroyd, Gia Miabia, Corenzi, Leo Wild, Michael, Reserva, Sarnia Knight, Space Budgie, Sim7, Sinister Gaming, Tom, Thorn, Felicia, Winchester, and Zorts. As Raz mentioned, we are on the road to Fooey. We are at 21 of 25 needed for that next sub emote slot, and it's going to be a Fooey emote. It's September, so half up subs. If you have Amazon Prime, you get a free sub for a Twitch channel each month. And thank you to Capo for the bits. If you want to support the show financially, please go to support.gnomepodcast.com. All of your support goes to help supporting this labor of love. Well, I am Frazley, and you can find the show at gnomepodcast.com. So until next week, be awesome. Welcome to the Frazley Report, a short broadcast by me, the Awesome Gnome, about the World of Warcraft. So this week, Pandaria had an influx of people streaming in looking for key fragments for vaults. Unfortunately, these hunters learned that Pandaria does not have a bajillion guns. There aren't even 76 vaults in Pandaria. The only fridge in the game had Harrison Ford hiding in it. In the other expansion zones, the goblins of Area 52 are still distraught as the campaign for people to storm the city in the Netherstorm on September 20th went awry when Facebook autocorrected their marketing post to Area 51. So between the Kyles and the Namiska gnomes swarming Area 51 in real life, Area 52 may never see a glorious return. Well, at least until maybe the day when Blizzard decides to make Burn Crusade servers. And with all the hype around Classic, and it's well-deserved as I've been having a blast there, it's time to start up the news hype train again for 8.2.5 as a new build has made its way to PTR, and today Blizzard has also released the patch notes. The patch is going to include the new Worgen and Goblin models, and we got new information on the 50th anniversary event. When you log in, you will get a little Nefarian battle pet, and you will also get a teleport to the Caverns of Time. Now, it's only usable during the event, but Blizzard also added a portal in 8.2 in the portal rooms if you aren't aware. And we got information on the raid. It is called Memories of Azeroth. Chromie has separated the strands of time, allowing you to go back and relive epic raid encounters from the Burn Crusade, Wrath of the Lich King, and the Cataclysm. Each of these limited time raids will feature 3 iconic bosses, and they'll be available as their own wings through the Raid Finder. To enter the raid, you need a minimum eye level of 380, and players who complete all 3 rings will receive the achievement Memories of Fel, Frost, and Fire, which grants the Obsidian Windbreaker, a black dragonflight mount inspired by Deathwing. And we'll be getting the conclusion to the war campaign in 8.2.5, so tensions continue to rise between Saurfang, Anduin, and the Banshee Queen Sylvanas. Discover the fate of the Horde and the Alliance in the final chapter of the war campaign. And WoW had reports that the splash screen on PTR has Sylvanas front and center, so who knows what is next for the Banshee Queen. Oh, and something sure to excite Lady Emma and make Maedhros very unhappy, Wrathion makes an appearance. So with N'Zoth's imminent emergence, you must seek help from an unlikely ally, the Black Prince Wrathion. Level 120 players should seek out Magni in the Chamber of Hearts to continue the story and discover the Black Dragonflight's whereabouts. And the notes talk about party sync, and Blizzard has an in-depth preview of this new feature as well. In short, it allows you to group up with friends and repeat quests that you've already finished. You can help them, and you get rewarded by getting a loot appropriate to your level. And there are also relaxed level restrictions for instance content like dungeons and battlegrounds. High level players can join and they will have their levels scaled, with abilities removed if they exceed their reduced level. And Recruit a Friend returns in this with new rewards. The old rewards are gone, so that must mean that the Swift server must have been too fast for them to get back into the system. The new system is based on months subscribed across all your friends, instead of needing 3 months per friend. And you can have up to 10 friends at any time linked to your account. Blizzard has a full rundown of all the rewards you can earn, and once you pimped out your character in the Explore, Transmog, and Mounts, you can even earn game time. So truly, time is money. There is so much to discover in the patch notes. Things I've carried here before, and new things like with the Lunar Festival, you can embark on a quest to be able to wear the flower crowns all year round. There are new items added to the Black Market Auction House, the ability to see your final destination on the world map for quests, and so much more. So there's no background downloads yet. Watch it happen as soon as this goes into the airwaves. Darn you, Blizzard, you always do that. The Party Sync preview by Blizzard mentioned that it is only a few weeks away. Well, that's all the news I have for today. So until next time, be awesome.
FrazlCast is a fan podcast that covers Blizzard games. We are not affiliated with Blizzard Entertainment, Inc. Views expressed by the hosts and guests are their own. Some of the art, music, and sound effects come from Blizzard games and are owned by Blizzard Entertainment, Inc. No copyright infringement is intended. The Gnome Train Intro is by Allie of Dungeon Fables and All Things Azeroth, and the opening music is by Brandon T. Blaylock.
This show is brought to you by Dragon Powered Studio. Find more at dragonpoweredstudio.com.